Now, in the times today, there is nothing really important or original because the Times supports the philanthropist who is a devotee of Charles Darwin and says that the virus, after the virus, the survivors will have to reinvent themselves in the Charles Darwin mold and they will be the winners. So that is a definitive, absolutely definitive recommendation from a two-page spread on the Times for racism, eugenics, and all the other evils. And the Times also carries a piece by the so-called constitutional law expert, Vernon Bagdano, whatever the pronunciation of the second name is, who is stupidly writing that the democratic future of this country will be better served by giving powers to the mayors. In the letter, there is no argument, there is no evidence in support of that, but that is what the Times has published. And so therefore there is a kind of agenda running through the Times for promoting the post of mayor and the corruption that it entails. And there is nothing elsewhere in the paper that has got any contradictory opinion or opinion contradicting that line. There is a piece in the Times, however, by the Rhodesia-born racist commentator called Matthew Paris. Now, Matthew Paris was an MP during Thatcher's years, and his first act of open lying was to pose the question, can he live or could welfare benefit recipients live on whatever the sum was at the time, £5 a week or £5 a day, £5 a day, I suppose, but it can be checked. And he's saying that he is both proud and ashamed of the empire. Now that sums him up. He cannot be proud and ashamed of the same thing. So the Times is not doing any favors to the campaigners for justice and truth and accountability by publishing that kind of rubbish. And as we continue on the theme of the promotion for mayors, we come to the world exclusive evidence base that we have. And we have evidence, directly empirical evidence of criminality being perpetrated by incumbents or wannabes for the post of mayor, either in the local kind of context or in the regional context. So let's say that in the regional first is the reign of Ken Livingstone as the mayor of London, at the expense of London during the period 2000 and 2008, 2 terms. And he was kind of felled during the 2 terms, second term, that is 2004 to 2008, by calculated and planned revelations about his corruption. And the planned and calculated revelations were carried out via the Spectator and the Evening Standard and the Daily Borisgraph. And that was intended clearly, after the events have shown, to benefit Boris Johnson and let Ken Livingstone be buried by the voters at the 2008 election. Before going into the details about how Ken Livingstone was exposed as a crook and abuser of the post of mayor, Let's look back at in a short paragraph at what I did personally to stop Livingstone's propaganda being perpetrated in Tower Hamlets at least. I noticed in Brick Lane during the weekends, groups of young persons, almost all of them Bangladeshis, who had not been seen in the area and who had not been living or born in the area, living in or born in the area, but had been kind of recruited from a demographic source that wasn't disclosed, but they were all doing the same thing, which is how I got to notice them. They were carrying quite, quote, professionally printed leaflets. And the leaflets contained unfounded kind of praise for Ken Livingstone. And this was happening during the, let's say, the months of March and April, I think. Before March, April, yes, March and April, before the May election for the post of mayor in 2008. So I decided to confront them, but they won't kind of stop to answer questions. So I persuaded about two of them, I think, or at least one of them, with one of his guides, I suppose, who was local, that is, who was raised in Tower Hamlets, who brought up in Tower Hamlets. So I sat in a cafe or restaurant in Brick Lane with the two of them, and I asked them item by item questions about the list of achievements that the leaflet contained about in favor of Ken lying still Livingstone. I said, I asked them, or asked the one that I actually had found to be distributing the leaflet. I asked him to explain each of the boasts or boasted of item. And he did not kind of have the answers. And he could not answer because they were all lies. Now that was a representative action by me. It wasn't the action that would have stopped the rest of them doing the kind of leafleting that I caught this one doing. But the reason I wanted to do that was for the records to show or to identify the fact that Livingstone was the beneficiary of a program in Tower Hamlets of false propaganda for him. And the propaganda didn't have any member of the indigenous white kind of part of the population in Tower Hamlets. These are all Bangladeshis, and they are not categorized as white, part of the white kind of part of the population. And these ones, if the blankness in the answers of the one that I actually was able to sit down with showed, the blankness and the lack of answers showed that the whole project of distributing bogus claims in support of Ken Livingstone as the candidate for mayor at the 2008 election, the whole campaign was set up by Livingstone and by him using Tower Hamlets based kind of stooges to promote his image. Now, it is a fact that Tower Hamlets as a borough was on the record as having produced the higher numbers of votes for Ken lying still Livingstone. And I don't think that this kind of high number of votes for Ken lying still Livingstone was a result of people independently assessing his candidacy as a better one. I think that the Ken lying still Livingstone focused on Tower Hamlets by using his many links with stooges in Tower Hamlets. And almost all the stooges were none of them was with the white part of the population. almost all of them that I could determine were with Bangladeshis. And there was hardly anyone that I could see or find or detect that came from the African background, at least in Tar Hamlets. So Ken lying still Livingstone, targeted the voters of Tar Hamlets to be lied to as part of his kind of election strategy. And he was lied for and lied about in the leaflets, or the leaflet that I actually was able to spot at that time. Now, if that is extrapolated, then across London, Livingstone must have distributed similarly kind of locally related kind of leaflets in order to get votes. Now, that was a criminal offense. I would say it's a criminal offense, even as distributed or defined by Richard Morey. Morey, whose ruling was published on the 23rd of April 2015 against Lutherawan, contained a number of definitions of what was corrupt and what was not. And by taking a number of the definitions that Morey stated in his ruling, Ken Livingstone was active in lying and committing crime and corruption and corrupting the electorate or corrupting the electoral process in London from Tower Hamlets. Now, it is obviously only as an extrapolation because I didn't visit any other borough during that time. So I did not witness personally any similar activities going on. But if the counting of the votes is any guide, then any number of other areas registering significantly higher numbers of votes for Ken Livingstone must be linked with his having distributed this lying leaflet or a version of the lying leaflet written in accordance with the local needs of the local borough or local part of the electorate. Now, going back to the role played by supporters of Boris Johnson against Ken Livingstone for the post of mayor at the expense of London in the run-up to the election in May 2008. The supporters or the stooges of Boris Johnson included Andrew Gilligan. Now, Andrew Gilligan did the publicity through the London Evening Standard at the time. And he also was supported by the role played at the time by the London London television, ITV London News and BBC's London News program. Now, BBC London News program, which is fronted by a woman called Hrs Latif, was in 2008 evidently, clearly, visibly, very much playing the role of a fan for Boris Johnson during the weeks in the run-up to the election for the mayoral post in 2008. Now, that was my opinion, my observation, and my finding about Hrs Latif. And nobody else in the kind of 12 years that have passed pointed out anything about Hrs Latif and Boris Johnson until last week, when the appointment or announcement about Allegra Stratton as Boris Johnson's television body, there has been kind of contextual reference to Boris Johnson having wanted to employ Hrs Latif as his television double or person. But Hrs Latif, as within quote, credited by Kevin Maguire in the Daily Mirror, wisely rejected that by saying words to the effect that her career would be destroyed if she took the job. And Kevin McGarr, of course, is a fan of Riz Latif. I am not, and nobody in their correct mind could be fan of Riz Latif, who is very shallow and very ignorant. But the fact that she is in the BBC London Post as a lead fronter of the London television news, to most people amounts to her having gravitas and content and substance. Essentially, what happened in 2008 was that a combination of Riz Latif, London ITV London News, and the Evening Standard successfully demolished the image of Ken Livingstone, despite the fact that Livingstone was still heading for a high number of votes borough-wide in Tower Hamlets. That didn't amount to his having higher votes altogether than was given for Boris Johnson. Now, the reason why I said that the corrupt post and corrupting post and the corrupt incumbent is to do with mainly the work that Andrew Gilligan carried out for the Evening Standard and the Spectator and the Boris Graph, was that Gilligan, published reports about Ken Livingstone, allowing one of his ethnic advisors extreme kind of immunity or impunity from accountability or compliance with any kind of codes of conduct or requirements. And that advisor, so-called, took the abuse as a license to do anything, which was also reported. And the reporting of the Ken Livingstone advisor, who was a person of mixed race, African and European, the revelations of the abuse or abuses by that particular individual kind of gave the publishers of the anti-Ken Livingstone accounts quite a lot of time to kind of over which they milked the source of the information or the evidence that they found. And Andrew Gilligan enjoyed it, and they published it over a significant period of time. And the abuses included a lot of abuses kind of done by that particular individual, included granting of funds, GLA, Greater London Assembly or mayor's funds, to persons and causes and groups and bodies that were not doing what they were supposed to be, said to be doing, and they were kind of dubious kind of recipients. Money that exceeded several million altogether. Of course, the clincher, the actual final career-wise fatal event was not just the abuse of money, but sexual kind of behavior featuring the same kind of advisor of Ken Livingstone, who reportedly sent communications to a woman that compromised this advisor's position significantly, so that this advisor to Ken Livingstone was forced in a position where he did tender his resignation from the post as advisor to Ken Livingstone. But by the time he did resign, the damage had been done to the prospect of Ken Livingstone getting re-elected for a third term in the 2008 London mayoral election in May 2008. So, what this shows is that Ken Livingstone was not behaving as a democratically accountable mayor incumbent. Not only that, lying still Livingstone condemned critics of his behavior as being in the wrong. And he condemned the entire sitting of one assembly sitting, and he condemned them by naming his advisor as being above reproach and as being not having or abused his position or done anything wrong. It was Livingstone who named that advisor to the assembly, as Livingstone defied calls for answers and accountability. So Ken lying still Livingstone came apart. He lost it. And that was not the only time that he lost it. So therefore, what this is doing, this analysis, factual, is telling the Times to stop promoting the mayor post and telling Vernon Bogdanov to stop being such an idiot. He may have had a career as an expert as a sort of expert in the British Constitution, but if this letter today supporting or peddling the cause of having more mayors is an accurate guide to the state of intellect that Vernon Wagner was carrying, then he's an idiot. He doesn't know what is going on, and he should know before he can put that kind of peddling in a letter in his name in the Times. And the Times should allow evidence about mayors' corruption and criminality, and the posts being completely beyond the pale and beyond any democratic reach. And the argument should be based on the evidence, and the evidence is that the mayor post is a detraction from democracy, is a denial of democracy, a denial of the local community's rights to transparency and accountability. And that this post should be not only not expanded, but it should be scrapped. That evidential argument can help the cause of local democracy. And the local democracies are crying out, local communities are crying out for local democracy. As the campaign to scrap the mayor post in Tower Hamlets, I have been campaigning to have the post scrapped. And whenever there has been any occasion when this issue has been discussed, I have tried to argue the case in favor of scrapping it and in favor of creating a democratic, accountable local council in Tower Hamlets. Now, the latest one was started in June this year, and it has been hijacked by subtle operatives who wanted to keep the post. Now, in the context of Tower Hamlets, this is dangerous and irresponsible, and it is in itself a corrupt act. That is to say, to undermine the campaign against the post of elected mayor is a corrupt act, I say. Why? Because despite the fact that the election commissioner, Richard Morey, Mawrey, Richard Morey recommended various actions against Luther Rahman, whom he found to have got into elected post as mayor at the 22nd of May 2014 election, so-called, by using corrupt means. I mean, despite that recommendation, no action has been taken against Luther Rahman for corrupt behavior or corrupt means. Now, what that means is the same thing will be happening. If the mayor post is allowed to continue, then corrupt behavior cannot be checked by the existing status quo of powerless or emaciated kind of councillors, although they are elected. Lutfur Rahman was not even communicating to the elected councillors about the millions of pounds he abused. And he gave grants to completely corrupt, unidentified and unidentifiable, unaccountable elements across Tower Hamlets. And to this day, which is now more than 5 years since Lutfur Rahman was ousted, there has been no prosecution either of Lutfur Rahman or any investigation really into any of the recipient outfits. And this despite the fact that there exists in this country an election kind of commission, and there is in this country other kind of bodies that supposedly to charity commission, for example. Charity commission is worse than a liability. That is to say, the charity commission is a conduit outfit for criminals, organized criminals, to commit big crimes under the covers of charities. I have tried to get the charity commission do the right thing, right job, and hold the criminals operating under the covers of a subsidiary outfit attached to the Spitalfield Small Business Association. But the charity commissioners failed to bring these criminals to heel. So I have to seek proper accountability by the criminals through other means, and that is not easy to find. And that's the problem in this country. Accountability is not available to the standard that the crimes warrant. For example, when the Spitalfield Small Business Association's criminals were operating, they were doing so with the collusion of Tower Hamlets Council, where Lutfur Rahman was in place as the incumbent mayor. And Lutfur Rahman was daily informed of the various stages of the perpetrations and criminality. And Lutfur Rahman daily replied or responded, or regularly responded to these assertions and these demands for him to stop the criminality. And he responded by saying that he was doing the necessary. That was a lie. Lutfur Rahman never did the necessary to stop the criminals, ever. How do I know? Because after years of this lying, which I was telling Alibor Chaudhry that Lutfur was lying and Alibor Chaudhry must not relay Lutfur Rahman's untruths to me, Alibor Chaudhry admitted to me in a conversation that was completely unplanned, not planned and not kind of known to be planned, in a surprise, it's an unplanned conversation in Brick Lane, saying that one of the criminals in the council was indeed intending to commit crime and was lying. And both Lutfur Rahman and Alibor Chaudhry retailed those lies as the truth at the time. So I said to Alibor Chaudhry, why are you telling me this? What difference does it make now, after years since I said right from the beginning that Colin Cormack, who was the liar under reference, the Colin Cormack was a liar. Why are you telling me this now? I knew that. And you said that he wasn't lying, that you were trying to find out. You didn't find out because you knew. You knew that Cormack was a liar, and you were only telling me that he was not a liar because Lutfur Rahman told you not to tell me that. Now, this is the kind of mayor regime that Vernon Bagnanor and the Times want. Do they want this? If they don't want this, what kind of mayor do they want? Do they want the kind of mayor that is Ruxana Fayaz in Newham? Well, it's the same thing. Ruxana Fayaz has been silent to hundreds of claims and calls to her to stop the liars in Niwam Council. And she has not stopped them. So this is the kind of mayor that this is the kind of mayor that is doing the damage to local democracy in every area. And Ken Livingstone was the kind of mayor that did the damage to the cause of democracy and democratic accountability and service across Greater London. And as Boris Johnson is a lifelong liar and career-long liar, he did the damage that suited him for 8 years. And for the last, 4 years, Sadiq Khan has been doing the same damage. And Sadiq Khan has been lying and peddling lies and untruths. He's not accountable, and he can never be accountable because the structure of regional assemblies, which is London Greater London Assembly, the structures are restricted, and the participants, the people who become members, are so self-censoring and kind of ignorant and lacking in courage and democratic kind of assertiveness that depending on them to deliver a democratically accountable incumbent as mayor is absolutely out of the question. It cannot happen. Now, if that cannot happen, then a public-spirited, campaigning member of the population in London can seek judicial review, can't they? But the judicial review is like a black hole. You cannot get anything out of there. Judicial review is a non-starter, is a complete rubbish. It is not an option. It cannot be realized by absolutely no one. I mean, there is no judicial review for ordinary people, no judicial review for democratically holding a mayor to account. There is no judicial review at all. And similarly, there is nothing from the local ombudsman or so-called local government ombudsman. And there is nothing that can be found for justice, for accountability, for democracy by going to the House of Commons committee about local government and local communities. And there is no sign whatsoever that either side of the UK House of Commons is bothered about delivering democracy. They have nothing but contempt for people and democracy and accountability. And that is why we should not be allowing peddling for the post of mayor at any level, any stage. And the latest example is shamelessly celebrated by the Daily Mail. In the Boris Johnson peddling, supporting corrupt Daily Mail, which is running this Jennifer Arcuri exclusive that she did have sex with Boris Johnson. Now, any student, any observer, any kind of expert, if you like, in body language, who saw any of the clips, video clips or the images of Arcuri with Johnson would have concluded without any moment's hesitation that they were not only having sex, but they were very closely and very passionately involved physically with one another. And any student of texts and linguistics would have known that Johnson's messages and communications, to the extent that the ones that were published, left no doubt about the fact that he was having a sexual relationship with Arcuri. Now, why is that important politically? Because he gave money, public money, abusing the post of mayor public money to her. And after years of that being suppressed and kind of kept secret, he renewed support, financial support for Arcuri in the last 2 years. Now, that is Boris Johnson abusing the post of mayor, because while he was holder of the post of mayor in the name of London, he was biking to Jennifer Arcuri's flat in Shoreditch, as it was claimed at the beginning. It seems that Tom Bauer changed the location to Islington rather than keeping it in Shoreditch between Hackney and Tower Hamlets. So whether it was Hackney and Tower Hamlets or whether it was Islington, the basic facts remain that Boris Johnson lied about his relationship with Jennifer Arcuri, and Arcuri lied as well, of course, and she has lied until this so-called interview. Arcuri lied, that is a secondary importance. Johnson lied is the primary importance. Johnson abused his position as the incumbent mayor in the name of London. And he abused that position to financially benefit his sexual kind of partner. That is as bad as they get. And yet Johnson is not only not accountable, held to account, but he is now the frontier of the cabal calling the British government. How many damages can we count that he is doing? This two-page spread, obviously it's coming from the Tom Bauer kind of book, linked to Tom Bauer. And it's written by Barbara McMahon. It is datelined in Louisville, Kentucky. So Jennifer, is our Prime Minister a Y-fronts or boxers man? The elegant, designer-clad blonde sitting in front of me, socially distanced, of course, bristles. I think it's irrelevant whether I've seen someone in their underwear or not. She sniffs. Come on, Jennifer. Don't be a spoilsport. We know you know. It's all there in a new biography of Boris Johnson, along with how his dad broke his mom's nose, his fisticuffs in a lift with the former Chancellor George Osborne, his one-night stand with the brunette in Davos, and you and he in a London hotel room, with him plodding around in his underwear, eating cheese, conscious about his looks and his need to lose weight. Now, this is all coming from Tom Bauer's book, of course. That is the book. So where is the actual outrage? It's not outrage in the papers. There is no outrage in the Daily Mail that he did all of that, and he lied, and she lied. So who will hold these mayors who are being painted as saints? Who will hold them to account? Because all the mayors are beyond accountability in the framework that they work in. So that is to say, the London Assembly. When Ken Livingstone was caught lying for his advisor, he then told off the Assembly who were asking questions. So he was not being kind of apologetic for failing to refusing to answer questions about his advisor, who had been linked to with huge financial abuse. And Livingstone had the audacity to challenge the London Assembly members to face his advisor, as if he was, his advisor that is, was of a superior status than the Assembly members, many of whom were elected members and some nominated members as part of the arrangement between the parties. But Essentially, Ken Livingstone was relegating the role of elected representatives of communities across the London areas and elevating the position of his advisor, who was undeniably involved in significant, massive abuse of the funds and powers that were associated with the incumbent mayor. The same thing extrapolated across the borough's mayors' reigns. And there is nothing that the elected councillors have shown able to do against any of the four councillors that we can talk about. Lewisham's Steve Bullock, Newham's Robin Wales for 16 years, and Tower Hamlet's Lutfur Rahman, or for the last 5 years since 2015, John Biggs, or their counterparts in Hackney. And the same applies to Peter Soulsby in Leicester. Soulsby is a known liar because we know that because he lied for the big business cross-rail fronted agenda while he was an MP, and years before he became available and able to stand for election as mayor in Leicester. We caught Soulsby and other MPs lying for the big business cross-rail fronted agenda. And since he became elected mayor at the expense of the people of Leicester, Soulsby has been doing all kinds of wrong things, abusing people and abusing his powers. But he has not been held to account at all, nor has he been, of course, he has not been kicked out. And the people of Leicester are left powerless against the connections and against the kind of built-in impunity from accountability and answerability that Soulsby has been allowed to enjoy. So we say to the Times, despite the fact that we know it's a corruptly owned newspaper, owned and its editorial kind of direction being ordered by dirty digger Rupert Murdoch. We tell the Times and we tell the likes of Vernon Bogdanov to stop lying and to stop peddling the post of this undemocratic, anti-democratic, criminal post of mayor at any level. We shall be talking about the corruption of the mayor-fronted regime in Newham in next edition.